Joining us once again is our Extension Forage and Pasture Management Specialist, Daren Redfearn. Now, Daren, last week on the show, you talked to us a lot about that stubble height on pasture and keeping an eye on that. Talk to us for a second, though, about the importance of that in terms of the recovery of the pasture.
Okay, so when we're talking about maintaining that critical stubble height, what we're moving toward is that objective during drought of grazing management. Okay, so the tendency is when we get in a drought situation where forage becomes short, is just to open up all the gates and let the animals have access to every pasture available. When if you think about that, that's actually going to be counterproductive to that objective of maintaining that critical stubble height. Okay, now that stubble height, that's critical for two factors. Short term, that is for even during a drought, when we get infrequent precipitation, pastures that have a taller stubble height, they're gonna regrow a little more quickly. Long term, the same thing occurs, is that those pastures that have had the stubble height maintained over a longer period of time, is that once conditions return to normal, those are the pastures that are going to recover quickly. Okay, so when we talk about grazing management, the thing that we're going back to is that critical stubble height. Okay, and so one of the goals of grazing management during a drought, we realize we're going to have to feed animals for extended periods of time sometimes, and so one of the goals we have then is picking what I call a sacrifice area, an area where we just beat up and don't really care we beat it up. Yeah. Ideally, we would like for that to be our worst area, but sometimes it's not, just because of water availability for the livestock. Okay, the reason that's important is because when we have to come back in and renovate or replant, that's the area we're going to focus on. Okay, now if we've opened up all the gates and let the animals have, then we've got all the acres we have to contend with, but our sacrifice area is what we focus on. Okay, so that brings us back to grazing management. That would indicate that whether we pick continuous or rotational, that would kind of lean us over a little bit more towards the rotational aspect, in that when the critical stubble height is below what we have predetermined, we move those animals into that sacrifice area and feed them a little bit as we go along. Mm-hmm. Okay?
All right. Now, it sounds like when you're talking about rotation here, we're not just saying, turn them out on this pasture for a week, maybe this pasture for a week. It's almost like we're talking about limited access to the forage.
Limited access would be a good term. That's also a pretty good management strategy when we're talking about grazing. That's done quite a bit in a lot of the winter annual pastures, primarily when they're used as protein supplements. But we could also use that strategy on a lot of our summer pastures in order to maintain that critical stubble height a little bit more efficiently. As an example, let them graze during the day, bring them back to the sacrifice area at night.
Okay. Now, it's a little bit early, of course, as far as growing seasons go, but is this a time to start thinking about weeds in the pasture?
During a drought, I don't think it's ever too early to think about that. We did have quite a weed explosion last year in a lot of our summer pastures. Producers that were able to take advantage of controlling those, kind of indicated they thought they had a little bit more forage production. I think what's happening there is when those weeds are controlled in these thin pastures during a drought, those weeds aren't using moisture, and the moisture is available then for some of the forages to have a little bit more production.
All right, so definitely something to keep an eye on as we head into the spring. All right, good information as always. Daren Redfearn, our Forage and Pasture Management Specialist.